My name is Robert King. I'm 45 years old, and until 10 months ago, I thought I had my life all figured out. I was working as a construction project manager in Orlando, Florida, bringing in a steady $85,000 a year. It wasn't a fortune, but was enough to give my wife, Victoria, and me a comfortable life in our modest three-bedroom house on Maple Street in College Park. Victoria and I had been married for 8 years. She was beautiful, ambitious, and came from a wealthy family, old Florida money, the kind that built country clubs, private schools, and gated communities. From the very beginning, her parents, the Wilsons, made it clear they didn't think I was good enough for their daughter. They showed it most bluntly when they insisted I sign a prenuptial agreement before our wedding in December of 2016. It's just to protect the family assets, her father, Charles Wilson, explained in his lawyer's office downtown, his voice as cold as the glass table between us. Nothing personal, Robert. Just business. I signed without hesitation. Love makes you blind and reckless, and I was madly in love with Victoria. The prenup seemed simple enough. What was theirs stayed theirs. What was mine stayed mine, and anything we built together during our marriage would be marital property. It sounded fair at the time, and I pushed aside the nagging unease I felt. For 8 years, our marriage felt solid. We weren't rich, but we were content. Victoria worked part-time at an art gallery downtown, earning about $26,000 a year, more out of passion than necessity. We often talked about kids, upgrading to a bigger house, maybe even traveling more once work slowed down. It felt like a normal, steady life. Then, one Tuesday morning in October 2024, everything changed. Victoria had been playing the same set of lottery numbers for years, a mix of birthdays and anniversaries. She always laughed about it, saying, "One day, these numbers are going to make us millionaires." And on that Tuesday, they did. $12 million. After federal taxes, about $8.1 million remained, since Florida doesn't tax lottery winnings. I remember staring at that ticket in our kitchen, the late evening light spilling across the counter, while Victoria screamed with joy, leaping into my arms and shouting, "We're rich, Robert. We're actually rich." For a fleeting 10 minutes, I believed our dreams had come true, but the celebration quickly shifted into something else. That same night, her entire family descended on our house, her parents, her brother David, even her Aunt Margaret, who usually pretended I didn't exist. They popped champagne, toasted to the Wilson legacy, and made grand plans for the future. But as the night wore on, I noticed the way they looked at me. Sideways glances, whispered conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Victoria herself seemed different, suddenly distant, her warmth cooling into formality. In the days that followed, her behavior grew even stranger. She spent hours on the phone with her family, speaking in hushed tones and walking out of the room when I came near. Whenever I asked about what we should do with the money, she deflected. "We need to be smart, Robert," she would say. "My father knows financial advisors. He can help us protect the windfall." Her words felt rehearsed, as if they weren't truly her own. 3 weeks later, on November 2nd, Victoria sat me down in our living room. Her parents flanked her, their expressions grim, and her brother smirked from the corner as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Victoria's voice was unnaturally formal when she began. "Robert, we need to talk about our situation." Charles cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Son, this lottery win changes things. Victoria's windfall needs to be protected." I corrected him sharply. "Our windfall. We're married. What's hers is mine. What's mine is hers." The room fell into icy silence. Patricia, her mother, exchanged a knowing look with Charles, while David's smirk widened. Finally, Charles spoke again, his tone smug. "That's not exactly how this works. Lottery winnings are considered personal property in many cases." Before I could argue further, Victoria delivered the final blow. Her eyes avoided mine as she whispered, "Robert, I think we should separate for a while. This money, it's mine." I picked the numbers. Her words hit harder than a fist to the gut. "What are you saying, Victoria?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I want a divorce," she said flatly, "and I want you to move out today." Charles leaned forward with a predatory smile. The prenup you signed protects both parties. Victoria's lottery winnings are her separate property. You're not entitled to any of it. 8 years of marriage, discarded in a single evening because real money was now on the table. I stood in stunned silence, my mind racing. I see, I said quietly. So this was all planned. Nothing was planned. Victoria snapped, her voice sharp with guilt. But I won't let anyone take advantage of me. Take advantage. That's what she thought our marriage had been. I swallowed the rage boiling inside me, forced my voice to remain calm, and simply said, "Fine, I'll pack my things." Relief washed across her face, and her family looked smug, convinced I had accepted defeat. But they had no idea what they had just unleashed. That night, I checked into an extended-stay hotel on International Drive for $115 a night. And instead of drowning in self-pity, I made a call they never expected. I reached out to James Hayes, one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in Central Florida, a man known for tearing apart cases others thought were airtight. His consultation fee was $600, and I paid it gladly. The next morning, sitting in his office on Orange Avenue, I handed him my copy of the prenuptial agreement. He read it carefully, his eyes narrowing with interest as he flipped through each page. Then he leaned back and smiled. "This is fascinating," Hayes said. "Your in-law's attorney was very thorough, almost too thorough." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" He pointed to a clause on page 3. "Right here, Section 4.2 states that any assets, prizes, or winnings acquired during the marriage are considered marital property, subject to equitable distribution upon divorce." I blinked, stunned, but they said lottery winnings are personal property. Hayes shook his head, his smile widening. "In Florida, lottery tickets purchased with marital funds during marriage are indeed marital property. And even if Victoria used her own money, this prenup overrides that default rule. Mr. King, your in-laws just handed you the keys to the kingdom." A cold satisfaction spread through me, steadying the storm that had been raging since that night. "So I'm entitled to half," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. Hayes nodded. "Potentially, yes. But they'll fight this with everything they have. My retainer is $18,000. If you want to do this, we'll need to be strategic." And in that moment, I knew what they thought was my downfall was about to become my revenge. I used my credit card and even borrowed against my 401k to pay Hayes' retainer. And looking back, it was the best investment I ever made. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria and her family made their intentions crystal clear. They hired one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Orlando, a man named Bradley Morrison, a shark with a reputation for protecting wealthy clients and their assets at any cost. His hourly rate was an eye-watering $950, and almost immediately, he began flooding me with threatening letters demanding that I relinquish any claim to the lottery winnings. His argument was simple but cold. Since Victoria had picked the numbers and bought the ticket, the winnings were her separate property regardless of what the prenup said. They underestimated me completely. In their minds, I was just a working-class man who would crumble under pressure and accept whatever scraps they decided to toss my way. But they were wrong, and I was about to prove it. Hayes and I worked tirelessly through November and December, piecing together every detail that would strengthen our case. We documented when the ticket was purchased, which account the funds came from, and even uncovered that Victoria had been buying lottery tickets for years using our joint Wells Fargo checking account. But the real turning point came one evening in late December, during a quiet strategy session in Hayes' office. He leaned forward with a glint of triumph in his eyes. "Robert, Florida Statute 61.075 is very clear about lottery winnings acquired during marriage," he explained. "Unless there's a specific agreement stating otherwise, they're marital assets." My heart pounded. "But didn't the prenup exclude them?" I asked. Hayes grinned, shaking his head. "That's the beautiful irony. The prenup your in-laws force you to sign doesn't weaken your claim. It strengthens it. They specifically included language stating that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. They were so obsessed with protecting their existing wealth that they accidentally opened the door for you to claim this windfall. Meanwhile, Victoria was burning to the money like it was infinite. She bought a brand new BMW X5 for $87,000 in November, filled her closets with designer clothes, and put down a $750,000 deposit on a waterfront condo in Winter Park. Her social media turned into a highlight reel of excess: fine dining at the Ravenous Pig, luxury shopping sprees at the mall at Millennia, champagne soak nights at exclusive bars. She was flaunting our marital fortune to the world, and every photo, every receipt, every tag location was quietly becoming evidence in my favor. By January 2025, the divorce battle officially began. Morrison came out swinging, filing motions to dismiss my claims and painting me as a gold digger chasing a legal loophole. Our first court appearance was on January 15th at the Orange County Courthouse. Morrison strutted in wearing a $2,000 Armani suit, smirking as if the outcome was already guaranteed. "Your Honor," he began with theatrical confidence, "Mr. King is attempting to claim half of winnings that his estranged wife earned solely through her own intuition and luck. The lottery ticket was purchased with Mrs. King's personal funds, using numbers she alone selected. This is clearly separate property." Judge Patricia Henderson, a seasoned family court judge with 18 years of experience, listened silently, her sharp eyes betraying nothing. Then Hayes rose calmly to respond. "Your Honor, Florida law leaves no ambiguity here. But beyond that, the prenuptial agreement, drafted and demanded by the Wilson family themselves, specifically states that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are marital property. It does not exclude lottery winnings, and it does not set a limit on the amount." Morrison scoffed and waved dismissively. That clause was intended for trivial sums, not multimillion-dollar jackpots. Hayes didn't flinch. "The document says any prizes or winnings, Your Honor. It does not distinguish between small or large amounts. The language is absolute." Judge Henderson requested full copies of the prenup and financial documents, then adjourned the hearing for 2 weeks to review everything thoroughly. Victoria was livid. I later heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been screaming at her parents, blaming them for the prenup's wording. The Wilson family, once so smug, was starting to unravel. Their panic became even clearer in early February when Charles Wilson himself called me on my cell phone, something he had never done in 8 years of marriage. His voice was strained but still carried that practiced arrogance. "Robert, let's be reasonable," he said. "We'll offer you $1.2 million to walk away clean. That's more money than you've ever seen." I told him I'd think about it, though I had already made up my mind. Days later, Victoria showed up at my extended stay motel room unannounced. She looked worn down, her once polished appearance replaced by exhaustion. The late nights, constant spending, and endless pressure were clearly taking their toll. "Robert, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We can work this out." I was scared, okay? The money, it overwhelmed me. My family got in my head. "I'll give you $3.2 million. Please, let's just end this." I looked at the woman I had once loved with all my heart, and for the first time, I felt nothing but pity. "It was never about the money, Victoria," I said softly. "It was about respect." She left my room in tears, and though for a fleeting moment I almost felt sorry for her, the feeling quickly passed. By February and March, the discovery phase revealed the full extent of their mistakes. Hayes subpoenaed all of Victoria's financial records, uncovering years of joint account lottery purchases dating back to 2019. We had proof of a consistent pattern, undeniable evidence that the tickets were marital expenditures, and with every revelation, the Wilson family's grip on their fortune slipped further from their hands. More damaging than anything else was what Morrison had advised Victoria to do with the money, because instead of keeping it separate as he should have told her, she spent it freely and mixed it with other marital funds, and in legal terms that meant she had commingled the asset, which only strengthened my claim. But the true nail in the coffin came when Hayes discovered that Morrison himself had made a devastating mistake. In his haste to file preliminary motions back in November, he had actually acknowledged in official court documents that the lottery ticket was purchased during the marriage with marital funds. Hayes nearly laughed out loud when he told me, barely able to contain his glee, saying, "He just destroyed his own case, Robert. Morrison is so used to bullying people into settlements that he got sloppy." The final hearing was scheduled for April 18th, 2025, and as that date crept closer, the Wilson family's desperation became impossible to hide. They hired a private investigator to dig into every corner of my life, hoping to uncover something, anything, that could be used against me, but they found nothing. I had lived a clean, honest life. They tried to claim I had been emotionally abusive, hoping such accusations might reduce my settlement. And Victoria even gave a deposition where she painted me as controlling and manipulative. But the problem was they had no evidence, no police reports, no medical records, no witnesses, nothing but fabricated lies. Hayes dismantled their claims one by one, producing phone records that showed Victoria had been the one making the major financial decisions throughout our marriage, while bank statements proved beyond doubt that I had never controlled her access to money. Her own social media posts betrayed her, showing a woman who had lived freely, happily, and indulgently during our years together. Just 3 days before the hearing, Morrison made one last attempt to settle, offering me $4.5 million. Hayes looked at me across the table and said quietly, "It's a good offer, Robert. Taking this to trial always carries risk, even with a strong case." But I shook my head firmly. "This isn't about maximizing money, James. This is about justice." The night before court, I lay awake in my modest motel room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how this entire nightmare had started with a prenup designed to keep me away from their precious family fortune. The irony was poetic. Their own greed and paranoia had created the weapon that would undo them. They had always looked down on me, believing that working-class people like me were beneath them. But tomorrow, they would learn that integrity and perseverance outweighed arrogance and wealth. April 18th arrived gray and humid, the kind of sticky Florida spring day that clings to your skin. I put on my best suit, a Navy Joseph A. bank I had purchased for our wedding 8 years earlier, and the symbolism was not lost on me. When I reached the Orange County Courthouse, it was buzzing with reporters and cameras from local stations like West 2 and Fox 35, because construction worker fights for lottery millions had become a human interest story. Inside, Victoria sat with her family on one side of the courtroom, pale and nervous, while Morrison leaned in close, whispering frantically in her ear. Judge Henderson entered promptly at 9 a.m. and called the case. Morrison stood for his opening argument, trying to project confidence, but I noticed his hands trembled as he spoke. He painted me as a vindictive husband attempting to steal money I hadn't earned, claiming the winnings were Victoria's alone since she had chosen numbers and purchased a ticket. Hayes stayed calm, jotting notes on his yellow legal pad, his composure unshakable. When it was his turn, he rose slowly and delivered his opening in a clear, steady voice. He explained that the case was simple. The prenup explicitly stated that any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage were marital property. Florida law supported that interpretation, and the documentation showed without a doubt that the ticket had been purchased with marital funds. The defendants are simply asking this court to ignore their own contract because they don't like the outcome, he said, his words cutting through the room. The evidence phase was a disaster for Victoria's side. Hayes presented bank records showing years of lottery ticket purchases from our joint Wells Fargo account, demonstrated how Victoria had commingled the winnings with other marital assets, and even produced the original receipt from the Wawa gas station on Colonial Drive, where the winning ticket had been purchased at 3:47 p.m. on October 8, 2024, paid for with our joint debit card. Morrison tried to argue that Victoria had always intended to keep the winnings separate, but intention meant nothing after she had already mixed funds. Then came the moment Hayes had been waiting for. He confronted Morrison with his own words, reading directly from the court filings he had submitted. "Mr. Morrison, in your preliminary motion dated November 18, 2024, you wrote, and I quote, 'The lottery ticket in question was purchased during the marriage with funds from a marital estate.' Do you remember writing that?" Morrison went pale, stammering about misstatements, but Judge Henderson pressed him sharply, forcing him to admit the document had been signed under penalty of perjury. The Wilson family looked stricken. Charles was sweating through his expensive Brooks Brothers shirt. Patricia stared down at her lap in disbelief, and Victoria's eyes darted around the room in panic. When Victoria took the stand, she was nervous, her answers halting. Hayes cornered her with precision, asking why she had deposited the entire $7.2 million into a joint use account instead of her separate SunTrust account, which already held over $63,000. She had no good answer, admitting she had simply needed somewhere to put it, which only proved our point. Hayes then revealed her BMW purchase agreement, showing she had spent $87,000 from the winnings before filing for divorce, still legally married, and without ever consulting me. By lunchtime, the Wilsons looked broken. Charles approached me in the hallway, warning that they would appeal any decision and drag the case out for years. I told him calmly, "That's your choice, Charles. I've got time and a good lawyer." The afternoon session was brief, because Judge Henderson had already made up her mind. At 2:15 p.m., she delivered her ruling, stating clearly that the prenuptial agreement was unambiguous. Florida law supported our position, and Victoria's commingling of funds further proved the winnings were marital property. With tears streaming down her face, Victoria clutched her mother's hand as the judge awarded me 50% of the net lottery winnings, totaling $4.05 million, and gave her 60 days to liquidate assets if necessary. The gavel came down with satisfying crack at 2:22 p.m., and just like that, justice was served. Outside, reporters shouted questions, but when one asked how it felt to win, I paused, smiled slightly, and said, "Justice always feels good." 2 months later, in June 2025, I used part of my settlement to buy a small construction company from a retiring contractor, and today King Construction employs 38 people and focuses on affordable housing projects across Central Florida. Victoria, on the other hand, was forced to sell her BMW, return the condo deposit, and liquidate most of her luxury purchases to pay me. The last I heard, she was working in her father's real estate office in Winter Garden, earning $42,000 a year, a far cry from the life she had envisioned. The Wilsons never spoke to me again, and I never cared to hear from them, because they had revealed their true nature-of-the-moment greed entered the picture. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply letting people face the consequences of their own arrogance and stupidity. They forged the very weapon that destroyed them, and all I did was have the patience and dignity to use it. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories just like this one.